Hello everyone, today we're going to be going over some different tips in combat to go through and help you in Grounded. Now, some of these are going to be more generalized tips as a whole, and some of them will be specific to specific creatures and tips on taking those specific creatures down. Now, there is not any specific format to this. I didn't number them 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I actually just started going through and walking around the yard, and I simply just started recording as I encountered different creatures or different areas. And so, with further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so first and foremost, just always remember, no matter where it is that you go in the yard, you always bring yourself a dandelion tuft, because you will never know when this game will go through and grant these bugs superpowers to go through and launch it into the sky. Yeah, it's unexpected, it's also hilarious, but just know it happens far too often, and if you don't have a dandelion, you are dead. Alright, now this next one here is actually for underwater combat. Underwater combat can be quite finicky in Grounded. You feel super slow and sluggish, and typically when you go through an attack, it is very, very delayed until you can use the next attack. So what you need to go through and do is attack, block, and just rinse and repeat. The block is not actually to negate the damage of the bug, it's to go through and to reset the attack animation for you, so you can go through and continue to string attacks together. Now typically if you were to do this on land, that means you'd be losing out on a huge third hit bonus, but the great thing is that with daggers, they don't really have that huge big third hit, so you're not actually losing out on too much attack damage by doing this. You're essentially just granting yourself a faster attack speed so you can go through and dispatch the bug at a quicker rate. Now you do need to be careful so you don't take a bunch of damage like you saw here in this clip. You do still need to try to block the attacks and not just rush through the fight, but you definitely want to use this attack animation cancel when you are in the water. Alright, now this next one here is the Spike Club, or the Spiky Club you get in the beginning. This thing is an absolute beast. You hit the mite once, and basically you can just walk away and it pops them. If you were to use the Spear, or if you were to use the basic axe at level 1, they both actually take 2 hits. And then of course you could just throw it at ants and make them explode. It's just a whole lot of fun. And as you can see, we whacked this guy too, and he goes pop. Alright, now next up is actually the Wolf Spider. This guy is pretty much the big bad menace of the lower yard, and basically what every new Grounded player fears. And for good reason, it is extremely powerful. Now when you go to fight this guy, my recommendation is basically go through and acquire probably Ladybug gear. You can easily beat him, not easily, practice, lots of practice, you could beat this guy. But I would recommend a good place to go through and to initiate combat with him if you're not feeling so confident, is get some Ladybug Armor and put a couple upgrades into the armor. And then for sure, 100% the Mosquito Needle. Because if you have never beat a Wolf Spider, you will not actually have the mutation unlocked to basically grant you poison resistance. But by using the Mosquito Needle, you actually go through and heal, and so the heal will almost offset the poison damage. Now, if your health does get chunked because you miss a dodge or a parry, and he's actually getting full hits on you, you can't out-heal that. But the big reason the spider is so hard to beat is because of how much poison he deals. And so if you actually have this healing weapon, you'll essentially negate it. Now, I'm currently not using any mutations, I don't have any poison resistance, no extra healing buffs, nothing, just Ladybug Armor. It is upgraded to level 5, and then this Mosquito Needle, which is also upgraded to level 5, both of which are tier 2 gear. And you don't deal a whole lot of damage, but this is a really good setup to practice parrying against them, because essentially you can just keep going in this fight and healing, and you don't have to actually use resources to go through and heal, which again will save you more time down the road, because if you have to go through and constantly look for things like smoothies or food to go through and constantly heal, that can be a bit of a struggle in the early game. So the sooner you can get this needle, the sooner you can go through and focus on some of these bigger, larger fights. And honestly, just practice. Even if you die, it's good to just go through and practice with this, because you're not wasting healing resources. And I think this is hands down one of the best ways to go through and learn to fight a Wolf Spider. And even if you die, it's totally okay, because you are at least learning the moves. Now, the next thing about the Wolf Spider, though, since we're here in this fight, is that there's actually a specific attack that is not actually an attack. It's a fake out. Now, go through and watch as he goes to attack me, okay? So in the first hit, he'll hit. The second, the third hit, if you were to watch my health, the third hit is not actually a hit. So don't bother wasting your time trying to block it. Just hold your shield up and wait for that fourth hit to come in. And then that fifth overhead hit does a massive amount of damage. So just make sure you basically don't bother wasting the time trying to parry or counter that third hit. You will probably do it on accident just because you see him moving and you're scared to get hit. And you see me still do the same thing, but that third hit does not actually register any damage, so there's no point to go through and make any effort to try and block it. I would just say keep your shield up and wait to go through and execute the parry for the fourth attack. Alright, remember I told you to get some Ladybug Armor to go through and take on the Wolf Spider? Well, this is the absolute best way to get Ladybug Armor. Go through and make yourself 5 spike clubs, just don't miss any like I did, and literally all you have to do is throw 5 of them in the Ladybug's face, because that's actually the weak spot there, and boom, she's dead, and you can go through and harvest a bunch of parts super easy without any risk of dying whatsoever. It is an absolute blast to just be throwing the spike club around the creatures. I had so much fun when I first learned this, and I hope that you do too. Alright, now this next one's actually a pretty big deal. So obviously you know you can switch between your weapons on your radio menu, but did you know you can actually switch your armor? If you go through and you're running around with things like your aphid slippers or ladybug gear, whatever armor you have, but you run into something like, let's say, a stink bug and you need your gas mask. If you actually place your gas mask on your radio menu, you can go through and swap to without having to press pause. Obviously in single player, if you go into the options menu and you have it set, then the bugs and the creatures just freeze and it's not that big of a deal. But if you're playing in a world where the game cannot be paused in the menus, then having an armor piece like this on your radio menu and being able to switch on the fly, there's going to be a good chance that it saves your lives and prevents you from actually taking damage. Now you've noticed my gas mask is about to break. I actually have 2 in my inventory, and because it's on my radial menu, I can immediately go through and place the second one on once the first one is broke. This could also be used outside of combat too. If you're simply just exploring the haze and the gas mask's durability is slowly going down, having a backup you can easily just switch to on the fly is great. This could also be used in the pond too, some of the breathing gear. If you think it's going to go through and break, just have some extra ones in your inventory and have it on the radio menu, and then you can quickly flip it on the fly. Also, if you have armor set on your hotbar and you think you're going to die, go through and unequip it at the very last minute, right before you die, and you'll actually save the durability from being damaged just because you died. Alright, now this next one here actually has to do with the Bombardier Beetle. Now, I've seen a lot of people online say that they think this is even tougher than the Wolf Spider just because the projectiles can be such a pain. But what if I told you these projectiles are actually really easy to go through and manage? When it goes to snipe you, just jump through it. Don't try to dodge it, don't try to run away from it. In Souls-like games like Elden Ring, when the boss goes to hit you because of the iframes that you have, you roll through those attacks. Well, in this case, the projectile does not damage you. This splat damage does. So simply just go through and jump forward through the sniping projectile, and you will not take any damage from it ever. If you try to go through and block it, you will still take damage, and it will knock you back. But if you wait for the snipe, which you will always use if you're farther away, just simply jump through and you will never take any damage from that move again. Alright, but what about the other abilities? Well, the Bombardier Beetle actually has 3 more specific abilities. He has one where you can go through and just lob stuff at you like that, and basically you just need to backpedal. He takes a bit of time to charge it up. And then he also has a shotgun blast, which he goes through and charges up, and you can see him go through and fire it at you. And then he's got that basic headbutt. Well, the shotgun blast, you can actually go through and just use the shield to block it. And it's even parryable. You can go through and essentially parry the shotgun blast. You need very, very careful timing. But if you can see that he's basically launching the bombs in the air, simply just backpedal and you will avoid all the damage there. It's best just to stay safe so you can predict what it is that he's going to do. And then if he's going to go through and just headbutt you, that's a pretty easy parry as it's a very, very telegraphed move. But then wait for the shotgun shot, and right as it's just about to hit you, right here you see it, and you can go through and block it or even parry it. Alright, and now another move that can actually be gone through and blocked is going to be the Firefly. If you go through and just stand near it, he's going to blast you with that goo in your face, and it's going to hurt a little bit. But if you just hold up your shield, literally just stand beneath the guy, hold up your shield, and wait for him to go through and fire, and look, you literally take 0 damage just by blocking it. But the cool thing is you can actually do more than just block it. You can actually parry it. Now, the timing can be a little tricky, but just stand right below him, and right as he's about to go through and use it, just go through and execute the parry, and you should be able to go through and knock him down and get a nice stun, and deal a couple of damage to him. And this is really good because sometimes they can just be kind of a pain to hit any of the flying creatures, and if you can execute that parry, or even just negate the damage, it should be pretty easy to go through and just swing your sword at him, or simply to go through and just launch a couple of arrows. And, yeah, hopefully that should make killing fireflies a whole lot easier for you. Alright, now the next up is going to be the mosquitoes, and I firmly believe they are the second most difficult creature in the lower yard next to the wolf spider, as I just showed you some things to make the bombardier beetle pretty easy. But these guys are insanely aggressive, they deal a whole bunch of damage, and honestly I find fighting them with a bow to be very difficult. I highly recommend you fight them in third person because they will be going all sorts of back and forth and over your head. You essentially just want to see where they're coming and wait for them to go through and use their charge attack on you. And then as soon as they use their charge attack, you want to go through and basically just parry it so you can knock them on the ground. And then use whatever weapon you have to go through and deal damage to them while they are stunned. I personally prefer blades or things that have poison, as it does go through and ensure that more damage will be dealt to them, even if they are not finished off after the first stun. Alright, and next up is the water fleas. These guys are actually not all that hard, not nearly as hard as the spiny water fleas, but they are in the lower yard, so I figured I would go through and cover them here. And essentially, it's going to just be the exact same tip I mentioned earlier for the underwater spiders, is that you're just going to go through and use attack, block, attack. And what makes the fleas dangerous is not that they deal a bunch of damage, it's just the fact that usually there's a whole lot of them hitting you from different angles. So essentially, whenever you are grouped up with a large portion of enemies, you want to do everything you can to get all of them on the exact same side. Ensure they are all facing you, and then just go through and start unleashing damage. Basically attack, block, ensure you're basically parrying anything that you can, or negating any damage that you can, and just keep resetting your attack animation, and it should make the combat here in the water, especially against groups of creatures like that, a whole lot easier. Alright, now we've already talked about wolf spiders, but this tip is specifically not about wolf spiders, but difficult fights like the wolf spider. When you go through and heal with meals, you typically have a healing animation, and it can take a while, but if you actually have a smoothie, you'll notice the moment I drank the smoothie, I immediately, instantaneously regained my health, and then I went through and I canceled the animation so I could go straight back into combat. It is an absolute must to have smoothies, because bandages have an animation, eating things have animations, they all take time. You want to use this as pre-fight buffs. In fights, use smoothies, cancel the animation, get straight back into it, so you have no chance of actually taking damage while you're healing. Alright, and now we are at the red ant heal here, and we've got the spiky club again, and this thing is an absolute beast. I'm telling you, in the early game, this thing is absolutely insane. But the soldier ants can actually be pretty difficult when they group up on you with other soldier ants or even other ants. This is a completely unleveled, unupgraded weapon, and the ants actually take more damage if you hit them in the face. Just 2 hits to the face with this club, and they are dead. Alright, now this next one actually is for dealing with the little ants. If you can actually kill the ant in one hit, so I'm just taking the spiky club and hitting them in the eyes, as the eyes is also their weak spot. If you kill them in one hit, you will not make other ants aggro on near you. Now obviously these soldier ants will aggro on if you aren't wearing the red ant armor, but as you can see, I killed the first 3 all in one hit and nothing aggroed, and then the moment I hit another one of them without killing it in one hit, they did go through an aggro. So it's a great way and just a fun way to kill the ants. If you can go through and just take them out in one hit, you can actually prevent a lot of the aggro on you, even if you're not wearing the actual red ant armor. Alright, and now while we are still here at the red ant hill, I actually went over and switched to the mosquito needle. And I stressed this earlier during the wolf spider fight, but if you're ever in a large engagement or in a whole bunch of groups of enemies, I'm telling you, if you don't have the resources to go through and heal, or you run out, this weapon is an absolute must. It's going to save you so much on healing resources. Now, I'm intentionally not blocking here in this fight. I will occasionally throw up my shield here and there, but I'm basically just soaking up all of the damage, and I'm healing back what is that they deal. Now, obviously, if these were larger creatures, they would probably be dealing more damage, or if I didn't have the tier 5 Ladybug Armor. But I am telling you that this weapon will save you so much time and you invest in trying to get it. And yes, the mosquitoes can be a hassle, but it's 100% worth it. I'm not saying this is the best weapon, nor is it the strongest, nor does it deal the most damage. But the healing sustain is a resource saver, which is a time saver, which allows you to go and to do other things. So I highly recommend you just carry it on you for moments like this, when you can just go through and heal yourself up and not having to worry about constantly spamming those healing resources, because honestly, running back and forth across the yard can take a bit of time. So I cannot stress enough how great this weapon is for new players, or even in the early game, to just save yourself some time. Alright, next up is the larva here, and we are back at it with the spiky club. Now, not only is this weapon deal an immense amount of damage when it's thrown, but it also has a special perk when you actually use the melee weapon without actually throwing it, and the fact that it deals bleed damage. Well, there is one super annoying thing that both larvae and red ants do, and then the moment they get low on health, they start to run. So I told you earlier, when you're fighting groups of enemies, keep them all on the same side of you. Now, I haven't gone through and blocked everything perfectly, and using a two-handed weapon does make it a little bit more challenging. But you'll notice that even here in this group, I'm hitting multiple enemies at the same time, and then the moment they run away, they actually die to the bleed damage. Alright, now this next tip here is actually pretty funny. So essentially, you know how a lot of players will cheese some of the spiders or the bugs in the trees. Well, there's really no need to do that, especially with like orb weavers and wolf spiders. as you can find quite a few of them near the pond. Simply just go out to the lily pad, and they're not going to follow you. They will sit there and try to attack you, and then they just can't ever get to you. Now, if you build a bridge out there, you best believe they will follow you out there. But they just will not attack you. If you can get them to fall in the water too, you will instantaneously kill them as they will drown. But if you do that, just know that their loot will no longer be lootable, and you will lose out on the opportunity for that. But if you're overwhelmed or simply just don't want to kill them or want to have some fun and cause them torture through drowning because they've caused you a whole bunch of torture and misery by killing you a bunch, then it can certainly be a fun way to go through and to do that, or just to simply have an isolated encounter. Alright, now next up is actually the larva again, as there's two different types of larva. There's roaming larva, and there's the larva that burrows underground. Now, I said this in a previous tips video that I made. You can actually tell what the burrowed creature is. If it's very quiet, it's a grub, and if it's loud and obnoxious like that, it's a larva. And then the moment they come out, go through and smack them with the shovel, and you will get a guaranteed stun every single time, and then just switch over to a different weapon. And then you'll notice I was able to go through and to kill him even before he was unstunned. A great little tip to go through and deal with those annoying little buggers. Alright, and next up is the orb weaver spider. Now, as you can tell, I might have a bit of a fascination here with this spike club in the early game, as I use it for a lot of different fights. And this guy, essentially, you could just go through and use 8 of these spike clubs to go through and to kill him. Now, I do recommend you go through and still try to attempt to block some of the hits he does, because he can still do quite a bit of damage if you're not careful. As you notice, I'm already at half health. But outside of taking those couple of hits that he did to go through and do, you could see he went pop just like every other creature with this club. It is just so much fun to throw spiky things around. Now, they are slightly more difficult to build than spears, but there is actually a thistle little tree right next to the oak tree, so you can go through and craft a bunch of these early on into your playthrough. Alright, now the last tip here is actually going to be to go through and to fight the bees. The very best place, in my opinion, to go through and farm up the bees is actually on the rocks just below the picnic table. As essentially you can go through and just a couple of practice, basically hit 1 or 2 of them and lure them over and just fight them one at a time. Now, I did realize though, if you attempt to do this at night, every single time after just a couple of hits, they will go through in retreat, so you can only do this during the daytime. Now, when it is daytime, go ahead and head on over here, line up your shot, and go through and lure one over, and like I mentioned, only one will come at a time. This is great, because if you were to go onto the picnic table, you would get a whole bunch of them swarming you, and this would become a whole lot more difficult. But essentially, you're going to go through, you can almost get him to half health, because of how far he has to fly over towards you, and then wait for him to go through and use his charge attack on you, and then the moment he actually uses that charge attack on you, you can go through and block it or parry it, getting a stun. And then make sure you shoot him in the eye or the face for that extra critical hit damage. And then once you do, it should be pretty easy to go through and farm up whatever you need for these guys, whether it be the bee fuzz or the stingers for zip lines or whatever it is that you need. Again, I recommend fighting these in third person. I would say that's pretty much the case for the majority of the combat in Grounded, but it just allows you to go through and see where they are, so you're not getting confused and spinning around in circles and not able to find these guys. And usually I aim for the ones in the bottom right corner of the picnic table, as they are the easiest to hit. Now, eventually you will run out of these guys, and you probably need to aim for the upper portion up top here, but you can usually get 3 or 4 just down here in the bottom, and like I mentioned, it's pretty easy. Just wait for the stinger to come in as from the charge, and it's guaranteed they will do it, because they will be basically coming from a long distance away. And just make sure you can go through and shoot them in the face. I did realize I ran out of arrows here, though, and that's the reason he got that hit off on me. But then, pop, there he goes. Alright, guys, well, that's pretty much all I've got for these tips. It did take me a little while to throw this together. I'm sorry there was not any structure. I kind of just was playing the game and just exploring and testing different things. But if you did enjoy this type of video and you want to go through and see me do more tips for combat and some of the higher end game creatures or even some of the bosses, then please let me know down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, then please consider leaving a like and subscribing if you're not already.